Okay, hello, welcome to my channel. Now in this video, we want to look at limits at infinity, right? Anyway, what that tells us is that we want to look at the limit of a function. Let's say it's a function of x. The limit of f of x as x approaches infinity. So that's what we mean by limits at infinity. That is, as our input approaches infinity, that means as our input increases without bound, okay? So you can talk about all real numbers, you say 1, 2, 3, 4, to 100, to 1000, and increase beyond that without bounds. So that's what we mean by as x approaches infinity. Suppose f of x is a function such as this. Let's say f of x is a linear function, right? Let's call it x plus 1. Okay, I would like to see how this behaves. So I would like to plot it on a graph, and then let's see how the function goes. So from here, we see that the intercept on the y-axis is going to be 1 at 1, all right? So if you want to draw, if you want to plot it, it's going to be a straight line passing through 1 on the y-axis. It's just a straight line like that. Good. And now, this is the positive x-axis. You can call it f of x, or you can call it y. Good. Now let's see what we've got. As our input, okay, let's say this is limit of f of x. In this case, f of x is x plus 1 as x approaches infinity, right? Let me just put it down here. Limit of x plus 1 as x approaches infinity. So you want to see what this gives us. So as x approaches infinity, so we are talking about all values of x increasing, right? So as we increase towards infinity, the result of this function is also increasing towards infinity, all right? On the y-axis, that's how it's going. So that tells us that as our input approaches infinity, let's say we have 1 million plus 1, it's going to be 1 million and 1, all right? But infinity is even larger than that. So what we see here is that the result of this limit is also infinity. That tells us that x plus 1, okay, approaches infinity as x approaches infinity. Good, great. Let's look at another function. This one is actually very interesting. Let's have f of x to be 1 over x, all right? Okay, suppose that's a function f of x equals to 1 over x. We want to see how this function behaves as our input approaches infinity. So you want to look at the limit, okay, as the input tends to infinity of 1 over x. Now look at this. If x approaches infinity, x is the denominator of that function. Therefore, the denominator is approaching infinity. That is, the denominator is increasing without bound. What happens to the entire function? What happens to the limit of that function? Well, maybe to really figure this out, let's look at how the curve, or let's look at the curve, all right? Let's plot this on a graph. Now, this function, 1 over x, okay, it is not defined at 0. So this is how the function behaves. It is just a curve on the positive x-axis and also a curve on the negative x-axis. Now you see this part, there's no way it's going to touch this horizontal line, and there's no way it's going to touch that vertical line. That's the same thing that happens here. It never touches this one, never touches that. As our input approaches infinity, observe the way this function goes, all right? We are declining as x increases. So as x increases, the value of the function reduces, okay? So as x increases without bounds, the value reduces without bounds. That tells us that the limit as x tends to infinity of 1 over x is going to be 0. Because as our denominator increases, all right, the result of the fraction boils down to 0. Good, great. Maybe you can look at it by looking at 1 over 1, 1 over 2. Keep on increasing the denominators as you keep the numerator constant. You will see that 1 over 10 is far less than 1 over 1, right? So 1 over 10 is 0.1, while 1 over 1 is 1. So if you want to compare, you see that as the denominator increases in a fraction, the result of the fraction reduces to 0. So that tells us that the limit of this function as x tends to infinity is 0. Okay, great. Anyway, we are going to be looking at a series of examples, and then we're going to see how some certain function behave as our input approaches infinity, or maybe towards the positive axis, or approaches negative infinity, that is a very large negative number. Anyway, alright, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.